Imagine walking into your own backyard, your private sanctuary, and discovering that for the last 6 months, every single moment has been recorded. Every conversation with your wife. Every time your kids played in the pool. Every quiet evening you spent thinking you were alone. Now imagine finding out it was your own HOA president who installed the cameras, and imagine what happens when you decide to fight back, with the law. Today's story comes from a man I'll call David. David bought his dream home in a quiet Georgia subdivision 3 years ago. Beautiful house. Good schools. Friendly neighbors. Or so he thought. David and his wife Sarah had saved for 8 years to afford this house. They'd lived in a cramped apartment, worked overtime, skipped vacations, all for this. A 4-bedroom colonial with a big backyard, mature oak trees, and a swimming pool. For the first year, everything was perfect. They hosted barbecues. Their kids made friends. David even joined the HOA board as a regular member, not because he loved rules, but because he wanted to be a good neighbor. The HOA president, let's call him Richard, seemed like a decent guy at first. Retired lawyer. Talked a lot about property values and community standards. David didn't think much of it. Then came the first letter. David measured his grass. It was exactly 3 inches, the HOA limit that he called Richard. "Hey, I think there's been a mistake. My grass is within the limit." Richard's response was cold. "The board's decision is final. Pay the fine or it doubles next week." Visual prompt 4, a close-up of the HOA violation letter with a $50 fine stamp, red arrow pointing to grass, 0.5 inches over limit. David paid. It wasn't worth the fight. $50 to make the problem go away, but the problem didn't go away. Over the next 4 months, David received 12 violation notices. His trash cans were visible from the street. They were behind a fence. His Christmas lights stayed up 1 day past the deadline. His dog barked excessively. The dog was inside the house. His fence was the wrong shade of brown. It was the exact color the HOA had approved 3 years earlier. Total fines, $3,200. David started talking to other neighbors. That's when he discovered the pattern. Richard only targeted certain people. Younger families. Minorities. Anyone who wasn't part of his inner circle of retired friends who'd lived there for 20 years, and David learned something else, something that made his blood run cold. One Saturday morning, David was trimming the hedges along his back fence when he noticed something unusual. A small black device, about the size of a golf ball, mounted on the corner of his neighbor's roof. It was pointed directly at his backyard. His first thought, his neighbor had installed a security camera. No big deal. Everyone has cameras these days. But then he looked closer. The camera wasn't a standard Ring or Nest device. This was something different, a professional-grade PTZ camera with a zoom lens. The kind that costs thousands of dollars, and it was pointed exclusively at David's property that he walked around the side of his house. Another camera. Then he checked the tree line at the back of his property. A third 1.3 cameras. All pointed at his backyard, his pool, his patio. Someone had been watching his family for months. David called the police. An officer came out, looked at the cameras, and knocked on the neighbor's door. The neighbor, Richard's brother-in-law, answered with a smug smile. "Those are HOA security cameras," he said. "Approved by the board. For community safety." The officer looked uncomfortable. "It's a civil matter," he told David. "Nothing I can do." David went to the next HOA meeting. He demanded answers. Richard barely looked up from his notes. The cameras were installed to monitor common areas and ensure compliance with community standards. "They're perfectly legal. They're pointed at my pool," David said, his voice shaking. "My children swim there." Richard smiled. "Then make sure they're following the rules." That night, David couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about those cameras. About who was watching. About what they'd seen. That he called a lawyer the next morning. The lawyer's name was Marcus Chen, a civil rights attorney who specialized in privacy cases. When David told him the story, Marcus was silent for a long moment. "David," Marcus said, "what you're describing isn't just harassment. It's criminal. Georgia is a one-party consent state for audio recording, but video recording of private property where there's a reasonable expectation of privacy, that's illegal surveillance." "How do we prove it?" David asked. Marcus smiled. "We don't have to prove anything. We just have to ask the right questions, in court." Marcus filed a lawsuit that changed everything. That he didn't just sue the HOA. He sued Richard personally. He sued Richard's brother-in-law. He sued every board member who voted to install the cameras. The charges: invasion of privacy, illegal surveillance, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and, this was the nuclear option, violation of the Federal Video Voyeurism Prevention Act. The discovery phase of the lawsuit gave Marcus the power to subpoena everything: HOA records, emails, security footage, bank statements. What they found was worse than anyone imagined. The cameras weren't just recording. They were being actively monitored. Richard had set up a viewing station in his home office. He and 2 other board members had been watching the feeds, including footage of David's children in the pool, but the real bombshell was in the emails. Richard had written to his brother-in-law, "The Patel family is next. Their grass was 0.2 inches over last week. We'll build a case." And another email, this one about David, "Keep the cameras on his backyard. His wife sunbathes on Saturdays. We'll get them on something." The HOA wasn't enforcing rules. They were running a surveillance operation targeting specific families, and enjoying the view. The preliminary hearing was held on a Tuesday morning. David, Marcus, Richard, and the entire HOA board packed into a small courtroom. Marcus called his first witness, the company that installed the cameras. Under oath, the installer admitted that Richard had specifically requested the cameras be positioned to monitor individual properties, not common areas. He also confirmed the cameras had zoom and night vision capabilities, features designed for surveillance, not community safety. Then Marcus called Richard to the stand. What followed was one of the most satisfying courtroom exchanges I've ever heard. Under oath, the installer admitted that Richard had specifically requested the cameras be positioned to monitor individual properties, not common areas. He also confirmed the cameras had zoom and night vision capabilities, features designed for surveillance, not community safety. Then Marcus called Richard to the stand. What followed was one of the most satisfying courtroom exchanges I've ever heard. Marcus, "Mr. Richardson, did you personally watch the footage from the cameras you installed?" Richard, "I reviewed footage as necessary for HOA compliance purposes." Marcus, "Did you ever watch footage of the Davidson family's backyard?" Richard, "Yes." Marcus, "Did you ever watch footage of Mrs. Davidson sunbathing?" Richard's lawyer objected. The judge overruled. Marcus, "I'll repeat the question. Did you ever watch footage of Mrs. Davidson sunbathing?" Richard, "I may have." The courtroom gasped. Marcus then introduced the emails into evidence. The ones where Richard talked about building a case against the Patel family. The ones where he mentioned David's wife sunbathing. The judge's expression said everything. The judge didn't wait for a full trial. She issued a summary judgment on the illegal surveillance charges. Richard was ordered to remove all cameras immediately. Pay David $175,000 in damages. Resign from the HOA board permanently. Submit to a federal investigation for potential criminal charges. Word spread through the neighborhood. The emails were public record now. Every family Richard had targeted, the Patels, the Garcias, the Wilsons, they all knew. An emergency HOA meeting was called. This time, the room wasn't filled with Richard's friends. It was filled with families demanding justice. Visual prompt 14, a packed HOA meeting room, with angry residents holding signs reading, "Resign," and "Justice." Richard's empty chair at the front. Richard didn't show up. The remaining board members, terrified of additional lawsuits, voted unanimously to dissolve the old board and hold new elections. David was nominated for president that he declined. "I didn't do this for power," he said. "I did this so our kids could swim without being watched." 6 months after the hearing, Richard pleaded guilty to federal illegal surveillance charges. He received 6 months of house arrest and 3 years probation. He was also required to register as a sex offender, because the footage included minors in a swimming pool. Richard's brother-in-law sold his house and moved out of state. David used part of his settlement to install legitimate security cameras, ones that actually protect his property, pointed at his own fences and doors, not his neighbors' backyards. The new HOA board passed a resolution banning surveillance cameras from being pointed at private property. The resolution was named David's Rule. If you're dealing with an overbearing HOA, here's what David's story teaches us. First, document everything. Every letter. Every interaction. Every email. David's meticulous record-keeping is what made his case unbeatable. Second, know your rights. What Richard did wasn't just mean, it was criminal. Illegal surveillance laws exist in every state. Use them. Third, don't fight alone. David found Marcus, a lawyer who specialized in exactly this kind of case. The right attorney changes everything. Fourth, and most importantly, never let them make you feel powerless. HOA board members are just people. Their authority ends where your rights begin. That's the story of how one man discovered his HOA was secretly filming his family, and used the law to destroy them. If you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare, drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to see what happens when an HOA fines a man $250 for having too many flags, and the judge's reaction goes viral, watch the video that's on screen right now. Subscribe. Like. And remember, they can write the rules, but they can't break the law.